means to say that he left behind the life that he was living before in order to create the possibility of living a new life. And that new life was a life of looking for enlightenment, searching for enlightenment. And according to the tradition, well, he fulfilled that, that path towards enlightenment. So going forth is another way of talking about renunciation. Okay, so this text, as I mentioned before, there are 4 lines. Are the 4 lines above that? They should be. Oh, sorry, they're right there. Sorry, the 4 lines are right there. Yeah. So I will just read the 4 lines first of all. So this is the root text, these 4 lines. If you're attached to this life, you are not a true spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. So these are the 4 lines of the text. As I said, I think probably we can only really look at the first one in any detail today, and hopefully at some other time you'll have the chance to look at the others. But you can notice that each of the lines directly addresses the issue of renunciation and attachment. But it talks about being attached and needing to renounce different things. So that indicates, or that underlines that when we're talking about renunciation or letting go, there can be various levels of that. Not all kinds of renunciation are the same. It's not, for instance, simply about renouncing money or renouncing material objects. It's, as it's clearly shown here, about renouncing attachment to self-interest. That's one of the things that we can renounce. And we can have attachment to views, ways of seeing things as well, that we may need to let go of in order to move forward. If at any point there are questions or somebody would like to intervene, please put your hand up, and I'm hoping that Padmatara will notice and draw attention to it. Yeah. So the first line concerns relinquishing attachment to this life. And what we're going to look at now is a very short commentary on the first line, which is about half a page, a little bit less than that commentary. It just expands, if you like, what that first line intends to communicate. So we will read that, and we'll read a bit of that. The first step is to relinquish attachment to this life. Discipline, study, reflection, and meditation, undertaken for the sake of just this life, give them all up, for they are not the Dharma. To begin with, to practice discipline is to possess the cause for reaching higher realms, the stairway to liberation, and the remedy that eliminates suffering. Without discipline, nothing is possible. But if it is observed out of attachment to this life, you have the root cause of the 8 worldly concerns. You criticize those with poor conduct. You are envious of those of the truly disciplined. It turns your own discipline into mere hypocrisy, and it sows the seeds of birth in the lower realms. So give up this fake and fabricated discipline. A person who pursues study and reflection possesses the wealth of acquiring all knowledge, holds a torch that dispels ignorance, knows the path on which to lead living beings, and has got the seed of the Dharmakaya. So I just lost my place there.
Right at the top was seed of the
Thank you.
Dharmakaya. Study
Yeah.
and reflection is the next one.
Study and reflection then are indispensable, but those who pursue them out of attachment to this life possess instead the riches of pride and arrogance, scorn for those of lesser learning and contemplation, and envy for all who accomplish genuine study and reflection. Forever seeking disciples and wealth, they own the root cause for reaching lower realms. So give up study and reflection motivated by the 8 worldly concerns. All those who train in meditation possess the remedy for negative emotions, the basis for accomplishing the path to liberation, the wealth of realizing the natural state, and the seed for attaining Buddhahood. Meditation then is indispensable, but those who meditate with only this life in mind find busyness and entertainment, even in seclusion, turn their recitation practice into meaningless talk, disparage those who truly study and reflect, and are jealous of other meditators, while their own practice is pure distraction. So give up your meditation on the 8 worldly concerns. So that's really the kind of material that we're going to look at for the rest of the session. I'd like to start by hearing if anybody has any particular response to that, anything that caught your attention or anything that seemed strange. What did you think of that?
Shraddha Dharma has something to say.
I thought it was interesting that it's things are given in terms of a remedy, as if she talks about the remedy, that we're given a remedy. So it's as if things can be I like the kind of the image of the medicine, because the medicine can be a cure, but if you take too much of it or misuse it, then it's a poison. So that's to me a very vivid image.
Great.
Sorry, were you going to respond? Or
no.
Okay, we've got 3 more people. Samachita.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, it's very challenging, isn't it? It's quite a challenging text.
Yeah.
You know, all these things like discipline, study, reflection, meditation, you know, they're sort of my go-to virtuous things that are going to get me through. And it's saying give them up if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So
right.
I find it extremely challenging, actually, and have to ask myself, yeah, am I doing it for the sake of attachment to this life? What is my motive? Yeah, and have I been literal minded about my practice of study, reflection, whatever? It's a big wake-up call, this text.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to that point because it's key, the point you're making, but maybe we'll hear the other comments and then come back to it afterwards.
Someone changed their mind, but we've got Ethan. Oh no, Brant, changed his mind again. Sorry, Ethan.
Okay, here I am. Yeah, maybe once again, I'm not sure what attachment to this life exactly means in this context. The first place my mind goes is, well, when I was very ill, I had to be attached to this life, or else I would have just passively accepted my death, which I had to struggle very much against. However, reading this poem, it doesn't seem like that's not what they're talking about at all. So as is often the case, maybe something got lost in translation there.
That's great, Brent. And I think you and Samachita both have kind of identified a key point in this first line, which is, so if we're talking about renouncing practicing for this life, what does that mean? What does that refer to? Well, the way that I would, but there's various things that we can say. First of all, it certainly means practicing not for the sake of enlightenment. And I think the suggestion is that what it means is your practice has other intentions or other goals. And you can see various mentions throughout this, the part that I read, of what people might be looking for. So they might be looking to have disciples. They might be looking to be famous. They might be looking to get rich. They might be looking for people to think that they're really impressive. All of those things, more specifically or perhaps more technically, there are several mentions of what are called the 8 worldly concerns. I'm sure some of you have come across these 8 worldly concerns, but they're very, very interesting, and I will briefly mention what they are. So the 8 worldly concerns are pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and infamy. According to the teaching of the 8 worldly concerns, sometimes they talk about them as the 8 worldly winds, which is quite an interesting image because, you know, winds blow us around, you know, winds influence us in various ways. And if we are practicing simply to get praise or to avoid blame, then we are not practicing in an appropriate way. We are practicing for other reasons. If we're practicing to be famous, again, you know, that is not the reason why we practice the Dharma, etc. So practicing for this life is looking for worldly outcomes as a result of Dharma practice. So if you think, for instance, that if you're generous, then lots of people will give you money. That is not a great motive for giving, you know, because the motive is essentially a self-referential motive. So I suppose the question would be, in your own mind, if you thought about practice or meditating or practicing the precepts for just this life, for benefits in this life, what would that mean for you?
Thank you. That certainly makes it clearer.
Would anybody like to comment on that, by the way, what it might mean for them practicing for this life, how you would see that in your own experience? Or you just want me to humiliate myself and explain all the ways that I do it, which I can.
We have a couple of people saving you from that.
Right.
John and MJ.
Thank you. It's been very interesting. This is such a timely topic for me now. I've been, as many of you know, I've been here in India for 6 weeks now, kind of trapped, and I can't get a flight home. Things get canceled. My daughter is in Indonesia. I'm supposed to be picking her up and bringing her home. And this has brought up a whole lot of suffering. And then I have been operating from the assumption that if I'm suffering, then I'm attached to something. And the only way beyond that suffering is then to let go or renounce that attachment in the language that we're using today. And what it has brought up is then, what is my attachment to? I think, oh, I've been floating along for 3 years now in this battle with my ex-wife around what my life is supposed to look like. For instance, this is just one area. And it really came home to me how much I still operate with this idea of how life is supposed to look like, how my relationship with my daughter is supposed to look. And, you know, so then I'm really kind of delving into what does that look like to me? What is this dream that I have of my relationship with my daughter? And it is realizing that it is a very samsaric thing that I'm not necessarily responsible for. I've inherited this from my culture, from my parents, from a lot of things. And it is not a bad dream. It's a very good dream, but it is a dream. It's not the way life works. And this has been the origin of my suffering around it. And then having to go, okay, well, that is a delusion, whatever words you want to use. Now I'm in a very safe place to kind of deal with this. And so, but what it has led me to get to is to really say, oh, this is where I'm doing this on an everyday level. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to renounce evil or dirt or anything, but it is a conception of life that's not real. It doesn't take into account what's happening, and so much is out of my control. And there is a way beyond that. There is by letting go of that dream and opening myself up to something that's more in line with the way things work, has had a very deep effect for me that goes well beyond this COVID crisis and my situation now. But I'll leave it there. Hopefully I haven't said too much.
Thanks, John. That's fantastic. I really appreciated you bringing in the idea of suffering and how that is related to attachment, and therefore how letting go of attachment may liberate you from suffering. There was someone else, wasn't there?
Oh, yes, MJ. Go ahead.
Hi. I was thinking of it in terms of, you know, the practice and the study and reflection. Certainly when I first came to Buddhism, you know, I wanted to be a calmer person. And I think of that as being a goal for this life. Not a bad goal, but it's not the same as doing these things to reach enlightenment. And it's something that Devajri has talked about, the idea of trying to make be more comfortable in samsara, fix samsara, so that I don't feel angry, I don't feel anxious, and in other ways, so that I don't sort of cause more harm or more hurt to other people. But it, which is a good goal. But again, it's like centered, goals centered in this life. And that, those things come as far as being calmer and treating other people with compassion and things like that. Those come with the focus on studying for, to reach enlightenment, to, and I think of them as, natural byproducts. Mm-hmm. If the goal is for enlightenment, whereas I feel like they're much less likely to happen if they're goals in and of themselves. And underlying those kinds of sort of worldly goals, it's not, so much praise and blame, but there is a sense of underlying it, then I'll be a better person. And that's still related to being in this life. So those were just kind of some things I was thinking about along those lines.
I think I'm just going to hand the rest of the class over to you, MJ, because I think that you are, hitting all the nails on the head with what you're saying. Exactly. And I guess as well, what you're touching on a little bit is a hierarchy of motives as well. So as you say, on a certain level, to practice to become a bit more calm, what's wrong with that? You know, that's not a bad thing. Most people who come along, or many people who come along to the Cuernavaca Center, I ask them, oh, why have you come? And they usually say something like, well, I want to find my inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually want to say to them, well, please don't come again then, because you will not find that. And well, what do I mean by saying that? Mokshasi and I were talking today, and we were talking a bit about psychotherapy. And she said that everybody who goes to psychotherapy says that they want to change because they're unhappy, right? So they want to change. But when they start to change, they don't like it. And they stop coming, which really, really struck me. So it's like we want to be calm, but without changing. So we want calm, or we want peace, but as something added on to what we are. We don't want to actually have to give up the idea of who we are right now in order to become somebody different that can then experience calm. We want to more or less remain the same, but with calm. And I think that's the kind of situation that we're in. We want to add on what Buddhism apparently can provide us with or give us, but we don't actually want to give up who we are, because that's all we know. And in the little group that I was in, we were talking a bit about that to renounce or let go leaves you in quite a vulnerable state, because it's unfamiliar, and you don't have your usual points of reference that tell you who you are, what to do. So it does have this vulnerability to it, letting go. But equally, if we don't let go, there's no possibility of change. So I think we need to be quite kind of vigilant about our motives, and we will probably find that over time, maybe our motives are changing. There's certainly nothing wrong in coming to a Buddhist center to want to develop calm. But what I would say is we start to realize that really to develop calm implies a process of self-transformation, really. It has to. It's not just learning a technique that we apply and then we feel better. It doesn't like that. It work like that. It certainly doesn't work like that in the long run. It might work for a short while, but the deeper issues, if you like, that are the causes of our lack of calm, will show themselves again. That they inevitably will. So when I was thinking about practicing for this life, I'm sorry if this is a bit of a strong term, but I thought about the idea of consuming Buddhism, the idea of seeing Buddhism as a consumer product. So I imagine that many of you, like me, like chocolate. So I buy quite a lot of chocolate, and I eat quite a lot of chocolate. And I buy it and eat it with some kind of idea that it will make me feel better. I think up to a certain point it does. But in my eating chocolate, there's no real kind of process of looking at more underlying reasons for my lack of satisfaction. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'll even eat the chocolate, and afterwards I'll feel, well, it wasn't that great. and I still need something else. And while we kind of relate to things in terms of, if I consume this, I will be better, I will feel happier, we're actually continuing our cycle of craving and suffering. And we can import this into Dharma practice. So we come along thinking, right, well, okay, I'll do this this Buddhist course, and at the end of it, I'll be 10% happier. And maybe we even got an idea of how to evaluate that. And if it doesn't, if it doesn't deliver, if you like, at the end of the course, if we don't feel 10% happier, we think, well, I won't do any more of that then, because it doesn't work. So very easily we import attitudes that we use in our life in relation to everything. We import that into the way that we start to appropriate Dharma teachings, Dharma practices, Dharma objects even. We can become a collector of Buddhist images, or we don't just have one meditation cushion, we have 5. And somehow in our mind, having more meditation cushions means we're a better meditator, or somehow we're more connected to meditation. But obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that. Does anybody want to intervene at this point? I can't see you all right now, so I don't know what's happening. Can you recognize any of this, what I'm saying, this idea of converting practices and teachings into something that you consume instead of something that transforms you? Because through doing practice, through meditating, through practicing the precepts and so on, we will become more aware of the motives that we had first of all, and we will start to examine those motives and hopefully purify them. I think it's almost inevitable, if we continue to practice, that we will begin to purify those motives, because if we don't, we'll probably stop practicing because practice won't be accomplishing the aims that we've got. If our aim, for instance, is to feel happy, we might start meditating and great, we feel really, really happy. But then what happens is that somehow we start discovering things about ourselves that we didn't know. And some of those things are not very, favorable. And that could make us quite uncomfortable, as we've been saying. And so we start to think, well, hang on, this practice is about making me happy. I'm not happy right now, so I'm going to stop. So we need to have a kind of vision of practice that goes beyond quite a limited outcome, if you like, a short-term outcome. Certainly in the long term, if we have a very limited goal and we're not willing to enlarge that, we're likely to get into difficulty. So I don't know whether any of you actually thought that much about the the guy, the swineherd guy, and why I told that story. But maybe I could just comment on that a little bit, just to bring that out. So what happens with him is that he has actually what seems like quite a good idea at the time. So he looks after pigs. That's what he does. And very fortuitously, fortunately, he comes across something free that is going to feed his pigs. So it's just a great outcome for him. There's no cost, free food for his pigs. And he certainly doesn't anticipate what's going to happen. You know, he doesn't anticipate that he's going to pick up all this dung and then he's going to end up covered in it. Yeah, that's not what he's thinking. But anyway, so he binds up his dung, carries it on his head, you know, like they do in India. Starts raining, and then, you know, the dung starts trickling down all over him. And at this point, I would suggest that his plan is less favorable than when he started. It's not such a great idea. But he's so attached to the outcome, to a particular outcome, that he can't see that. So what he actually ends up doing is covering himself in dung without really even paying attention to the fact that that's very unpleasant, because all he's focused on is, I'm going to feed my pigs. And I mentioned to Mokshasi and Devadri and Padmatara that the story itself is actually used as an analogy for attachment to views, attachment to views that are not helpful and that in fact cause harm. So it may well be that we have views, and you could also think about habits as well, attitudes, emotions. It may well be that we have various of those things, and they've worked for us up to a certain point. Maybe they worked in the past or something. Maybe they served a particular purpose. But now circumstances have changed. We're different. Life is different. But we don't want to give them up because we're attached to them. And our attachment means that we can't even see that these views or habits or attitudes are actually harming us. We can't see it because we're so focused on the fact that they're apparently helpful to us. So this is kind of where we are, how we are. And this is what I think this, part of what this section is inviting us to do. So it's inviting us to investigate a bit more fully. Well, why are we doing this? You know, why do we meditate? Why do we study the Dharma? Why do we practice the precepts? What purpose does it have?